Hi, welcome everyone. Today I'm very excited. We are speaking to a special guest, Thiago Ghisi. He is an engineering leader. He worked in Apple, Amex, and ThoughtWorks. I don't know if how many of you know about ThoughtWorks. It is an elite consulting company. Many of software major ideas have emerged from ThoughtWorks. They are truly thought leader in software engineering. So I will say it is an achievement to work with this elite group of people in itself. They are, I believe, in 17 or 18 countries, employ more than 10,000 people. So this show is not sponsored by them. I'm not trying to plug in, but I'm just impressed with ThoughtWorks, whatever output is coming out from their thought leaders as such. And Tiago, now he's joining another fintech startup as a director of development. He's from Brazil, has a computer science degree with an MBA. And I met Tiago through Twitter. I was very impressed with his tweets. Specifically, one of his tweets is about interviewing process of big tech. It was very impressive. And I requested him to come to our channel and talk about and give us some tips about how to get hired by these big tech companies and other management stuff. Hopefully,
Amazing.
hopefully this discussion with Tiago will help us all. So Tiago, welcome again and thank you for taking time to speak with us. As you worked in many big and small companies, let's start with ThoughtWorks. How you got hired by them, any learning from them, which you can share with us?
Of course. But first of all, I just want to thank you, Rafat, for inviting me on that. And it's been a pleasure to find so many amazing people on Twitter and doing projects like this one that you're doing on YouTube to kind of talk to people in the industry. That is something that's rare these days. So
Yeah.
congratulations on this project. It is a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
I'm really glad that we found each other.
Thank you. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So regarding ThoughtWorks, right? So it was, and I was saying to you this before I start recording, it was a school for me. It was where I believe I learned the most. And to this day, and not trying to sell anything to anyone, right? But to this day, I still joke that was one of the most amazing environments that I ever worked with, right? I joined ThoughtWorks in 2012, and 2012 is not that long ago, but things were different there, right? Agile and like XP and Kanban and everything and continuous delivery, continuous integration was not as standard as it is today,
True.
right? So I think the first thing on my story there was how I got into the company, because the interview process at the time, it was one of the hardest, and it was in the US, I believe in 2012. There was an article from Glassdoor what put ThoughtWorks as it was it was harder to get hired by ThoughtWorks than by Google and Facebook. And I remember that article. But so my story with ThoughtWorks actually starts in 2010. So 2010, I was working as a Java developer in Brazil in a small company there, and there was like a really famous forum that was called the Java users forum. Like in Brazil was like the place where every single engineer working with Java was posting stuff. And I noticed a few guys that were working abroad for ThoughtWorks posting things there, and I was learning so much from that. So I started to follow them and kind of like learn a lot from that. And in 2010 or 2011, there was the first Agile conference in Brazil that was called Agilis. That was like South America or Latin America Agile conference. And on that conference, I remember that I invited everybody in my company. Oh, let's go to this conference. The conference is going to be a lot of Brian Marik, that was one of the guys that signed the Agile Manifesto. Diana Larson, she had a book on retrospectives. All these guys and some guys from ThoughtWorks were presenting. It was a big conference, and it was my first conference that was 100% in English. And I remember to this day that I invited everybody, and no one wanted to go. So I took my car and I drove like 3 hours, and I went to this conference, and I was just amazed at what I found there. And two things happened on that conference. First of all, Roy, that is the founder of ThoughtWorks, he gave a keynote where he announced that ThoughtWorks was opening an office in Brazil. And second, I got to meet two of the guys that I've been following for years on these Java forums and talk to them. But one thing I learned on that conference was that my English was not good enough. I was one of the few that had to wear the auto translate kind of headsets. And I felt terrible about it because I could not talk to these guys. I was like I was barely like listening to things and getting the translation. And for the first time, I realized, man, if I want to like be someone, if I want to do something beyond kind of like this small companies in Brazil, I need to double down on my English because up to that point, I was just like, okay, Java, OO, TDD, but I was pretty much only reading things in English and like reading a lot of things in Portuguese, getting books that were translated. And then kind of like, I had this realization that, okay, maybe someday I'm going to apply for ThoughtWorks, but I had clear in my mind, I'm not even close to be ready for this. So I got back really excited about everything that I had learned on that conference and got back to my job. A year later, my English was still not good, but I got like a message from a recruiter on this brand new office that they had opened in Brazil, in Porto Alegre. And I kind of like, I took a leap of faith and I said, okay, my English is not good, but let's try it out. And after struggling in maybe like 10 interviews, and they're really tough interviews, doing like a home take exercise. And like at the time, there was like all those tests that you had to take. It was a really like stressful day. But I think two things helped me there a lot. One, so I mean, to short the story, I ended up getting into ThoughtWorks, even with like almost like basic level English communication. But I think two reasons why I got there. One, I was following those guys for years, and I would comment on their blog posts. I would talk to them on like via DMs. They knew me from because I was always interested in their stuff and always kind of like. And even though like I don't think I did well in our interviews, because I had been building this kind of like network of people that work there, they pretty much kind of like. They took a leap of faith as well on their side, saying, okay, this guy seems to be really interested. His English is not good. He's not going to be able to work in projects for international customers, right, or clients. And then I joined it. And then, I mean, from the first day to the day that I left, it was the most insane experience in terms of collaboration to extreme, like where we would have like different kind of like groups to discuss different topics. We would have folks like Martin Fowler coming to the office and we had to present what we were doing.
Wow.
So he would kind of repack innovative ideas and start to research and start to write articles about that, right?
Nice.
We had Jess Humble coming once. And I remember I was working with the guy that was translating the Continuous Delivery book to Portuguese. Imagine that kind of experience. The really early days of Continuous Delivery, 2012, it was like the book had just been published in 2011, and we were like doubling down on continuous like deployment and continuous delivery and trying to implement that in a lot of clients. And I think another thing that was really impressive there was like everybody was writing a book or giving a talk in conference. And we used to have like pretty much lunch and learns every day where someone was testing out, getting feedback internally first before put something out of the door. And that is what made that environment to be so rich because it was an insane amount of emails, but every time you'd say, folks, I'm thinking about starting this or submitting a talk to a conference on this topic. Who wants to pair with me? It was like a bunch of people. And I remember that we would work from 10 to 10, like from 10 a.m. to 6 would be working for the clients, kind of all that. From 6 to 10 would be open source, or we would kind of like do whiteboarding. We would kind of like be like, it was such a powerful environment because everybody was their probably first or second job out of college, moving to a different city and having culture, like folks from different parts of the globe coming to Brazil. Was not common at all to see someone speaking English in Brazil, kind of like on the street.
Right.
And we would have like folks from India, folks from China, folks from like UK, US. And ThoughtWorks used to do this where they had like a, I don't know, 20% of each office was from people that were from other offices. That is what really interesting rotation program. So then, I mean, after a year and a half there, I ended up coming for a client in New York to do the release of the project, and end up kind of like getting some messages from recruiters. And even though I was really, really passionate about topics, I decided that at that time I needed to change gears a little bit and challenge myself again. So I then moved to New York and started a journey on a startup. That was something that I had never done before.
Right. No,
But I stopped
very,
there.
very impressive because you are saying that around 2012 or so, you are learning English. And
Oh, yeah, yeah.
it's a, not long time. And I'm just listening to you. You speak now perfectly well, good English.
It's still not perfect.
No, it's very good.
But
I hope people who are listening to us learn from you that it was not only language you learned, but the action you took. Like you went to that conference by yourself and continuously interacting with these guys. And I think that really made a difference when they were hiring. In fact, this company is so much, I can say, a thought leader, as everybody knows, Martin Fowler. He made a big difference in my life too. I'll give you a small story. In 2018 or so, I was in Microsoft and I was giving a talk in PDC, and it completely bombed. It was very awful, bad,
oh man.
experience for me. And I had a cold water just before the talk, and I start coughing on the stage. It was
Oh
horrible.
man.
I thought I'll get fired because I did such a bad job. And then came to office, and fortunately, one of my friend, his name is Andrew, he said, you're trying to talk about service-oriented architecture, and there's a talk by Martin Fowler. Go and look at it and get some ideas from him. And I watched his talk and completely shamelessly copied the whole thing. And the next year, I gave the similar talk on service-oriented architecture, and it was good, I believe. So I have a lot to thank Martin Fowler. Of course, he has done a lot for the industry as such, but it did, make impact in my life also personally. So that's why
Yeah, yeah.
I was very intrigued when I saw in your bio about ThoughtWorks. I thought I'll start from here. So Thiago, I know you worked in so many companies, especially Apple and Amex, very big American companies. And before that, you worked in small company startup. Now you're going back to kind of a startup. So I want to know what is your leadership philosophy? What does it mean to you?
Okay, that's is a great question. And before I answer that, I just want to go back because you touched on a really important point about learning English. And for folks that are in the US, for folks that have done graduation or masters here, you almost take that for granted, right? But at the time, I was maybe 23 or 24 years old, and I I did a lot of crazy things to learn English. And one of the probably craziest things that I used to do was I used to drive every weekend 5 hours to see my girlfriend at the time. And I would be listening to podcasts in English for 5 hours straight on Friday evening when I would go, and on uh, Monday morning when I would come. I would at maybe after 10 minutes I would not understand. I'm not going to be able to follow anything because it was too above my level. But at some point that thing clicked, and I was like pushing and pushing and pushing, and it's crazy when like you want something that if you put enough effort, and if you have people around you helping you and taking kind of like giving you opportunities, right? And having, let's say, another thing that was huge for me was having folks from different cultures that also didn't have English as their first language is struggling with me. I remember all the folks from China that were in Brazil that were struggling so much with both English and Portuguese. And having that environment where you're not the only one that's behind and you're kind of pushing yourself really, I mean, helped me to do something that is really hard to learn a language after kind of like you're already adult, like is really, really tough. But okay, talking about leadership philosophy, I think I have I have a lot of philosophies on that, but I think the first one, the one that most inspired me when I read, and I try to talk on how I apply that, is the Good to Great Level 5 Leadership from Jim Collins. I don't know if you heard about that. And he has
Yes.
this analogy that I think is the best analogy and is what I try to do. He calls the window and the mirror. So the best leaders, they look at the mirror when something goes bad, and they look at the window when something goes well. So it's almost like if something goes bad under your org, under your leadership, you look at yourself for introspection, for see what you could have done different. If something goes well, you look at everybody else, the environment, and you try to appreciate things, even if you had like a small fraction of things there. But you actually you give credit to folks that were with you on that journey. So
Right.
that tells a lot about my philosophy behind it, and like I would say is a lot about servant leadership. That's like my style is I'm here to help, I'm here to serve you guys, and not the other way. It's not like I don't see anyone that reports to me as inferior or like, oh, you report to me, therefore I know more than you. No, I try to cultivate an environment where everybody is treated as a peer of mine, because I think a peer-to-peer relationship is the best kind of relationship you have. The moment you have someone that's like, okay, I mean, I know more, I'm kind of superior than you, you start to lose that kind of like exchange you have with people that are the same level. So I try to kind of like almost remove myself from that position of power, or like, oh, I'm kind of like here, but more I'm a facilitator. I'm a kind of like I'm an agent that's trying to like enable the team to deliver more, or like make sure that folks are feeling excited about things. Make sure that even if that means that they are leaving my org, they're moving to different companies, or they're moving to different roles, right? My job as a leader is to kind of like find out what is the biggest potential of each one that report to me, find out when things are not going well, and
Right.
try to like course correct things and put them on the right track. Of course, that's not always possible all the time. If you are on a project on a deadline, you might want to kind of like say, okay, maybe for the next 3 6 months, I'm not going to be able to move, not going to be able to do this, but this is the plan. Do you agree? And I think it's a lot of transparency, a lot of like collaboration. I think that's like in the final thing, Rafat, that I want to say is I try also to break this. I'm engineering, I'm product, I'm designer, I'm QA, I'm DevOps. I try to really almost like make my team believe that it's almost like to a point where folks don't know who reports to me, who reports to other director or to other. Is like I really believe that like a really good cross-functional collaborative environment is an environment where you don't have kind of like, oh, you are QA, you are, but people are mixing up that kind of like their expertise or who they report to is almost kind of like it doesn't make a difference, right?
Right. Right. Blur the boundaries. Right. Yeah. No, this is very good. So same on the same line, you already talked about how to be a good leader as such. Because my next question is, what differentiate between a good manager and a bad manager, or I will say an average manager? So if I try to frame this question in little differently, suppose I am somebody who just got promoted to be a manager. What all I can do so I can be considered as a good manager?
Okay, so there are a lot of definitions on that. I mean, I like the good manager. I would say the average manager, right? I like the definition from this book called The Effective Manager that he says in the book that a good or a good manager is someone that is able to deliver the results that the company expect, keeping the people around, right? Meaning two things, right? If you are delivering the results and people are not leaving, it means that you are keeping a health balance, right? Because those are the big two R's, right? Is results and retention, right? Are you able to retain the people, and are you able to deliver the results? This is like, okay, good manager is able to do that while retaining the people. But to me, that's not a good definition of a great manager, because a great manager is almost like, I feel that delivering the results and keeping the people is almost the bare minimum, right? I feel that kind of like a great manager is not only someone that delivers the results, is someone that kind of like thinks beyond the results, right? Is like is trying to think beyond what goals are assigned, right? And is not only the one that's trying to retain people, is the one that's growing the people, right? Is the one that is kind of like giving opportunities, the one that's like, so I think it's like if you see those two dimensions, results and retention, like a great manager is someone that kind of like over delivers in both dimensions. And there's so many ways, right? What does that mean, right? Because like, for example, if you look at retention, the great manager is not only, he or she, sorry, is not only trying to retain their direct reports, but they're actually trying to improve the retention of the organization, right? Is that you go up 1, 2 levels up, right? And is someone that's creating an environment that everybody feels safe, that everybody's collaborating, that there is no kind of like wars, let's say. So I would say that is, I mean, high level, my definition would be
Sure.
someone that's kind of over delivering both aspects.
Sure. Yes. Yeah. Sometimes I think when you are a new manager, maybe you will make a mistake of delivering something in time, but you will leave a lot of bodies behind, and that's not the success. So you have to deliver it with everybody keeping intact, and work-life balance and things like that is also important with the product. Sometimes in some companies you make these kind of mistakes, like product should go out of the door no matter how many people get killed on the way. Thiago, in this new environment where most of us are working remote, and one question I wonder about, how somebody can establish the trust in the team, because I know you are joining a company which is international company, and you will
Right.
have team all around the world. How someone can establish the trust in this environment?
So I would say trust is about one, I would say the definition of trust is someone that takes small commitments and delivers on that, right? That's how you build trust, right? You kind of like, you say you're going to do something and you go and you do it, right? And then after enough iterations, that is trust, that is like, you get to, it's not kind of like just like talk the talk, is walk the walk, right? But the biggest thing that I see, so okay, how do you as a manager get into a org and get trust of the team, of your leaders over time? So I feel that one of the worst things that a manager or someone new can do in an org is from day one try to change things without understanding, right? And I have this framework, Rafa, that I have been sharing again and again with folks, that is about the 4 Ps. It's like as a engineering leader, I think you should care about four pillars. What I call platform is the first one. Second one is product or product delivery. Third one is process, and the last one is people. But people is actually the most important one, right? So if you take those four pillars and you break it down, as you're starting as a new manager or as a new leader in the company, the first thing you should do is connect with people. The second thing, understand the business or understand the product. Forget about platform and process in the first maybe 2-3 months that you join a company. Your first goal is understand how people are feeling, understand kind of like what pain points do they have, and understand how the business is making money, what is planned for the product for the next couple of months, years, right? And I think one of the worst mistakes that I see is someone joining and wanting to skip people and product and go straight to either process and platform. Like someone that goes and do a deep dive on the code base and start to say, this is wrong, we should convert everything to microservice, we should not use this database. Oh, you're doing retrospectives incorrectly, you're not doing stand-ups. It's someone that from day one start to say a lot of shoulds, right? You should, and without actually building trust. How do you build trust? There is another saying that is not only the quality of the information, but the quantity of the information. So if you have enough conversations with someone about things that interest them, problems that they have, and you're able to not only listen, but also help them to improve in some ways, and you do that often, the trust is going to come up now naturally, right? That's how you cultivate relationships. It's not someone that you see once a year. It's someone that you see every other day, every week, right? And you feel that they are listening. You feel that they feel what you're feeling, right? That's the best definition. And not only that, they are kind of going to the next level. They are helping you to to go on your path, right?
True.
And to improve whatever problems you're feeling.
True, true. No, very, very good point. I think one thing is very important you told, which I hope everybody should learn or understand that it is not only listening about everyone's issues and problems, but actively try to participate and help without the other person asking. And some most important point I think you brought is do what you promise, deliver your promise. And I think that's one of the most important things for establishing trust. And sometimes we make a mistake because out of excitement we promise more. So this is again for advice for young people that don't overpromise. Promise only what you can do. Otherwise, you will have an issue in establishing the trust. So it's one of the very important point, I believe. So that's very good. So Thiago, another question I have, which I struggle in my previous job and as a CTO in this company also, that how your vision flows down 3, 4 level down, and everybody understand exactly what we are building, where we are going. And I feel all these big companies, Apple and Microsoft and all, they get successful because their vision is it goes all the way down. And but it is not a simple problem because I struggled myself also, especially now when the teams are remote and people are far away in different time zones, in different culture. What all things you can do to make sure that your vision flows across the board and everybody, marches on the same drummer?
Yeah, I would say in my case, two things. Number one is lead by example, and I'm gonna talk about this. Is like not only talk the talk, walk the walk, and I'm gonna say exactly how I believe a leader should behave there. And the second one is you should establish certain rituals for your group, for your org, where you have like certain things that are done on a timely manner and are done again and again to a point where that is where, especially now that we're remote, where a lot of the trust, a lot of the information, a lot of the roadmap, a lot of the vision is not only shared, but is also challenged by the team and iterated is opportunity you have to iterate on it. But okay, so when I say like is someone that lead by example is the idea of kind of like be the change that you want to be, right? So for example, if you want folks that are that have different job titles, they are in different orgs to collaborate more, what do you need to do? You need to show that you need to treat them equally, right? How do you do that? You don't exclude those folks from your meetings. You do one-on-ones with them. You kind of like you ask from their perspective. You don't treat them as second-level citizens, right? I see a lot of I would say a lot of elitism. I would almost say like, okay, I'm an engineer. You are, let's say, project management. You are product management. Oh, you are quality assurance. Oh, this meeting is only for engineering. Oh, I project managers cannot join this meeting. Or in the sense that kind of like I'm a developer and the leader is repeating the message that's the wrong message. He's like, oh, my engineer should not spend time testing their like the app, or they just open the PRs, they do the unit tests, and they don't even know how the product works. They believe because the CI/CD is green, they don't even understand the business. And I see a lot of leaders that keep doubling down on this philosophy, like, okay, engineering only, let's create this bubble. And especially on environment, I'm really heavy on cross-functional collaboration. That's why I'm kind of hammering down this. As a leader, what you should do, if you want that change, is you should start to have one-on-ones with your peers. You should bring them to your meetings. You should kind of like almost someone made a mistake. The worst thing that I have seen is whose blame is it? Oh, the blame is on the product. The blame is on QA because they have not done the testing. They try to find is the idea of the window and the mirror that I said inverted. It's like every time there is a problem, the problem is somewhere else. And usually the reason is because folks are so disconnected. It's like they're operating in bubbles, right? So I would say a great thing that a manager can do is making sure that the information is flowing not only to these direct reports or direct managers, but also to the peers and also to their boss if needed, right? If the boss not communicating across to the boss peers, is your goal to do that and to try to fill the gaps, right? And when it comes to opportunities where you have the opportunity to blame someone, you don't do that. Right? When it comes to where there is a calibration meeting and you have, let's say, all the ICs being discussed, you not only talk about your direct reports, you also sponsor folks that don't report to you, but you see doing a great job, right? It's almost, you remove those silos. I think that is a big example. Another example is, if you want your team to start to appreciate one another more, be the one starting that. When you see something right, send an email to the team saying, thanks for doing this. Thanks for staying late. Thanks for going above and beyond on that. And recognize the behaviors that you want to see. Not only the blames that or the problems when it happen. Whenever something right and whenever the behavior and the intention of doing that was right, even if the result was wrong, go and emphasize that. Folks, I know that we're not able to deliver the project on time, but we actually did so many amazing things. We collaborate this way. Emphasize what went well, right? It's almost like take it easy on the blame. And if you're gonna blame someone, blame yourself first, right? True. So I think that's the first part of the answer there. The second part is I'm a huge believer on processes, right? And I know that there's a lot out there that kind of like, I hate meetings. Meetings are ineffective. Like, I'm an engineer, I hate joining stand-ups, like all that kind of thing. But as a leader, I feel that one of the most valuable things that you can have is really effective meetings where you're not repeating the same message once. You're repeating 2-3 times in 4 different channels, and you are not only like saying that in like one way, you are also asking for feedback. And it's not a monologue, right? It's a dialogue where your team, and like you got to a point where the meeting is not only you, right? And I think the meetings where you have someone on a monologue are the worst kind of meetings, right? Because everybody is hearing, but no one is listening, right? It's like, yeah, the boss is there saying whatever he wants to say, but no one is engaged. So true. I'm a strong believer of like a series of meetings for each one of the cross teams that I like to run. I think I like to have meetings that happen on a weekly basis. So I think like a strong believer that we should be doing a grooming and a demo every week. And that can be at the beginning of the week. So we should actually go and discuss from the roadmap to the next release, what we're doing, bring up product, bring up SRE, bring up all the areas that are going to be involved in that project, and have not only reviewing the requirements, but also reviewing the results. Whenever we ship something, we go and we look at the dashboard, we look at the metrics. That meeting is where we discuss kind of what we're going to build next. And it is the moment where the team has a chance to influence and change direction, right? So that's one kind of meeting. The other kind of meeting that I recommend everyone is once every 3 weeks or once a month, do a retrospective. Retrospective to improve the process, to improve the culture, to improve whatever is not going well. Right? The focus is not on blaming. The focus is how can we double down the things that are working, and how can we do experiments or take certain actions to see if that will improve or not the next release or the next couple of weeks, right? And is driven by the team and is a chance for the manager to hear feedback of what they can do, what they can ask for budget for, like to the upper level management, right? The other kind of meeting that I think that is key is a staff meeting. Right. And so, because as a director or as a senior director, VP, whatever, you might have multiple managers, right? Or multiple directors under you. But a staff meeting is the chance where the whole org gets to hear from you the message, what the direction you want to go, the things you messed up, right? And it's where there is this social aspect that is missing today, right? Because you no longer go to an office. So it's where everybody see each other and see, oh, that person is actually on the same org, so I can talk to this. Like, and is also a chance for Q&A. Is also, and in my view, that needs to be happen weekly. But if you go to a org that is like over 50 or over like 35, then you might do monthly. But I still strong believer that's where you repeat every single email that you send, you repeat every single deadline that's coming. You kind of emphasize problems that are happening. You kind of like you almost like you summarize everything that C-level is trying to do, all the problems that engineers and managers are struggling with, and what you're going to do about it, right?
True.
It's like, and you ask for feedback on your ideas, of course, not only there, but is where a lot of information is flowing through the org. And that's where I feel that a big mistake is you invite only people that are your direct reports and don't invite folks that are part of each one of the cross-functional teams that are pretty much the composition of the org, right?
Right.
But I know is something really controversial. And a lot of people are going to say, oh, if they don't report to me, why do they need to have them in my meetings? They're going to hear things that's where you prove that you're transparent. That's where you kind of like, you gain the credibility, right?
True. No, I completely agree with you. If I'll summarize, is you have to communicate very consistently across
Consistent and
board,
in multiple channels.
multiple channels, and set up a cadence of different meeting at different level and keep repeating the information again and again. So because humans still have a selective hearing thing. So them to get your vision, maybe they have to hear it a couple of times. And one more very important point which you mentioned is have a two-way communication.
Yes.
Listen to people's ideas and let them tell you or challenge you around your vision. So that is very important, I think. And it should not be one-way communication. Yeah, very, very good points.
Another point there, I thought, is one-on-ones.
Right.
I feel that one-on-ones are key, and is where you should present the most controversial ideas first.
True.
It's like, in order for folks to speak up in big meetings that you're leading, here's a metric that I like to see. It's like, if you have enough trust, whenever you're presenting things in a meeting, folks from your team, even if they're 2 levels down, or they're going to speak up. They're going to say, because they see that transparency, they see that trust, right? They're going to speak up, they're going to be engaged, they're going to be challenging you. But in order to get there, you need to do one-on-ones, right?
True.
And that's another mistake that I see, is that like a lot of like director levels, senior director levels, they just only do one-on-ones with direct reports. And they never do, they do once a year with all the engineers. And I feel that to be effective, you need, and to build the trust, you need not only be communicating through your managers, but also hearing directly and building a relationship that kind of like flows across the different levels of reports you have.
True.
Because I feel that is the chance you have to course correct, right? If you see that someone is struggling with the direct manager, it might not be because the manager is bad or because the person is bad. It might be a personality problem. It might be, and you have a chance to see the problem forming, right? And you have a chance to see, okay, that person is struggling a lot. Maybe instead of doing once a month, let me do once every 2 weeks, because I need to understand more, I need to connect more. And maybe there is something that I'm not seeing.
Right.
And is your chance to act on a problem before it actually explodes, right?
Right.
And yes, it's a lot of work, and it's easy to get busy with only project and deadlines and meetings to senior leadership, all that, right?
True.
But you have to put the people pillar first on your calendar and do the other 3 pillars on top of that, not the opposite.
Right.
A mistake that I see is that a lot of people put projects first, and then they try to find time to put one-on-ones and process improvement, but that cannot happen. You need to have like the foundation of your calendar needs to be people. You need to have certain times allocated. I would say up to 33% of your calendar should be one-on-ones, should be hearing, and trying to understand and trying to kind of build the trust that only happens over time.
Exactly. It's a very, very important point. And this is how you will differentiate between a normal manager and a good manager. This is the most important point, that 101 should not only with your reports, but you should go down one level also just to get the feel. Because what happens is, as you go up in the hierarchy, there are less and less channels you have for the feedback. That's why I started basically a page, curioustoKnow.com, just so I can get an anonymous feedback. because
Yes.
it becomes very difficult to get an objective feedback. And of course, companies have a lot of way to get the feedback. But what I do is every time I send a mail, there's a signature. Anybody can click and give me a feedback. And I think it's very important.
That's a
Yeah.
powerful tool.
Yeah.
And I feel that if you can do that every 6 months, like Anonymous 360,
Right.
with everybody that you work with, peers, folks that are kind of like higher than you in the hierarchy, and everybody on your org.
Yes.
Totally optional,
True.
and ask like basically 3 questions: what I'm doing well, what I'm not doing well, and things that I should continue doing, or like any other suggestions you have. Completely anonymous, and whatever you have is
True.
not gonna be. And of course, your goal should be to get to a point where you don't need that anonymous part, where people are actually putting their names. But especially if you're new, especially if you have not get to that level yet, I think that's going to be amazing input you're going to get as a manager. It's painful. It
Yeah.
is. It is super painful to get that.
Yeah.
And there might be folks that are not prepared to give anonymous feedback because they might write things that they would not say one-on-one, or like there is the downside of the anonymous
True.
feedback, but there is amazing upside. If you're
Exactly.
able to filter down the things that are actionable, the things is off the charts what you can get out of
True,
that.
true. So I use this site curious2know.com. It's free. You can just go and sign up and put it under signature. I think it's very important to get a feedback channel open for a good manager. So Tiago, I have a next question about how you maintain the health of your team. Because suppose you take a new project and you think it will be done in 6 months with 6 people, and your management comes and says, no, we want it in 2 months and you'll get 2 people only. So how
Yeah.
you maintain the health of your team?
Yes. That's such a powerful question and a hard one.
Yeah.
I mean,
And it happens
I
everywhere.
try to, yeah, it happens everywhere. So the the first thing that I try to do, right, is make sure that we have, I would say, stand-ups, of course, but weekly. I, I like to have like some sense of how the projects are doing, right? And if there is a deadline, and I can only put like a limited amount of people on that project, the very next thing you should try to negotiate is scope, right? Of course. I mean, that's so how can you reduce scope, or how can we break it down, this project, in small deliverables, in small increments, right? And I would say between those two things is like, so let's go to the example that you said. Okay, we have this massive project, but we only have 2 engineers available. And the project needs to be delivered 6 months from now. But we know is a huge, and there is a lot of risk, right? So the first thing that I would do is, let's do an inception. Let's bring in not only the 2 engineers, let's bring in more senior engineers, more product folks, and let's try to break it down, this project, into 6 slices, right? What is the first thing that needs to happen, the second thing, the third thing, and let's forget about the rest. And once we define that's the first thing that can be delivered, even if it cannot be released to the users, it can be deployed to production, and we can enable for like a small percentage of users, whatever you can do, but you need to deploy to production, even if it's not enabled to the public, and even if it's only a tiny fraction of the overall scope. First goal is figure out the first slice, and then focus all the energy on delivering that first slice, and putting, I would say, certain like stop gaps in the middle, where like every week you are reviewing the progress of the project and you are acting on things that are not working. That might mean escalating, that might mean kind of like temporarily allocating other folks part-time on that project, even though I'm not a big fan of that. But your first goal is to get that first slice out, right? And I strongly believe that you need multiple feedback loops to get something done on time. So the first kind of feedback loop you have is the daily stand-up. And that is where the engineering manager is seeing, are we progressing? And the second loop is the weekly report, where we're kind of almost executive level report on the project, what was done this week, how much of the vision have we done? And then kind of like the third level is the release, or the monthly cadence, where you're shipping something. And what I noticed, like doing projects over the last 15 years, is that if you're able to deliver the first slice of a big project, you are almost mitigating 50% of the risk already. And a lot of times, if you're able to deliver the first or the second chunk of the project, most of the business goals are going to already be satisfied by then. So I think the biggest misconception when, oh, there is this big project, we only have this amount of people, is trying to do all at once or trying to have a single release or like, okay, we have 6 months, so you're going to take 6 months. You're only going to deliver something and get feedback and iterate on the month 6, right? That's the biggest mistake. And also try to like not have, I would say, someone managing that project directly with the engineers, facilitating the conversation across the different partners you might have on that project, across like everything that needs to happen, right? So I think that's like, if you can have 2 engineers, but have someone that is more opening the path and kind of unblocking them as soon as the problems happen, I think you can do wonders in 6 months, right? Even if you only have 2 people. But it's hard to say in the abstract, right?
True,
But I would say my techniques would be around one of those 2 ideas, right?
Right.
Reduce scope, break it down scope, try to have small deliverables in between, especially if they can be released to users, collect metrics, right? It's like daily, weekly, monthly feedback.
Right.
And act on the first level feedback that's broken. Okay, we know that something is off. Let's try to act as soon as we know that. Let's not delay, oh, okay, we still have time. And like,
True.
no, let's really, really kind of like be following that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Now, this is a very important point that don't just agree with the management because they will try to force you without understanding the complexity. It's important to push back. And as you gave this advice, which is very important, to try to come somewhere in the midway, break the features, break the product, and say how much we'll deliver, and just don't try to kill the team to deliver the whole thing.
Yes.
Very, very important.
And another thing that I didn't mention is like really understand why. Like, why is it important to the business to get this done in 6 months, right?
Right.
Is there a lot of times I found that most deadlines are flexible, right? Unless if they're attached to some legal requirement or some things. But a lot of times is someone high up is setting a deadline because in the past they got burned and things didn't happen, right? So they're just saying, I want this because I'm not seeing anything. So I say, okay, I want this in June. That's it. Because he or she is not seeing the progress. But the moment you start showing something, it's so much easier to get extension. If they see that thing growing, if you are communicating, right? It's so easy. If you are ahead of time, you're raising issues. You're saying there is a problem here. We are operating understaffed. And you kind of you build that trust that also matters at that level.
Right.
You can also do wonders by kind of like showing progress. That's why I say like weekly demos, like monthly, where people are seeing what's done and they can feedback on that, not only 6 months surprise. The idea of like the project is on green, and next day is red, right?
True.
There is no yellow.
True. So you brought another very important point. I want to underline it, highlight it, which is ask why. In fact, I tell all my devs even they should always ask why. Why are we doing this? Program manager or product manager come and ask, give me this feature, should always ask why. And we all should understand why we are doing it. Even if you are the junior most dev, don't just start doing because they told you. You should ask why. And it makes a huge difference. And I have so many stories around this in Microsoft. I hired, his name is Dooney. I hired him out of college. And first or second day he came and he started asking me, why? And within 3 months, he became a leader because he was fearless. He was walking in the office of the GM and asking him why. And it's such a good learning I got out of him that always push on this, why we are doing this. Awesome. Thank you very much. That's a good tip.
There is there is a book that was heavily influential on me. It's called Impact Mapping. And it is a book about trying to do a mind map out of the project, but is a really powerful technique where you kind of like, you try to figure out you try to figure out the different ways. It's almost a graph because it's almost like every time that I see a proposed solution, that's not the only solution to address the business goal. or to get what is. So if you're able to, it's almost like, okay, if a solution comes designed to you, okay, we should build this feature to increase, let's say, the engagement of users by 5%, to allow this certain thing. The question that you should ask is like, okay, is that the only way to achieve that thing? You go like 2 levels up, right? And you start to understand what is the business impact. What is it? It's such a powerful tool. Impact mapping. Look at it's like a really short book from this guy that is super passionate about the topic. It's called Goiko Adzik. He's based in the UK, and he has another book that's amazing called Specification by Example, and it's about decomposing the why in the metrics, and then putting on a graph where you can see, okay, there's option 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There is even an option that does not require building software. It might be using something that's already available. It's like expanding the scope of like options you have to achieve that certain thing. It's exercise that's rare to see. A lot of people just take for granted, okay, we need to build this feature. Here's the design. And instead of like asking why, or like really understand what's the outcome, what are the things, and is that the only solution?
Perfect. I will put the book detail in the show notes. So Thiago, next question I have about your hiring process. Like what you look in the candidate. If I want to get hired by you and I'm a young dev, what are things I should do to impress you?
I would say a lot of that boils down to soft skills and hard work. So I learned the hard way that communication skills are, I mean, as much as our job is hard skill based, right? It's like, okay, you're amazing programmer, you know all these practices, you know this language really well. The top of the top are the ones that not only they are able to kind of like master the hard skills, but they're also able to communicate why, and they're also able to explain what they're doing, kind of like how things are connected. Are they system thinkers, right? That's the thing that I look for. Like, not only you know how to write code, you understand how that impacts like every single thing, like that. How does that impact the CI/CD pipeline? How does that impact the users, right? Is the one that is able to think about kind of like the consequences, like the second and third level of consequences of that code, or of that thing, both in the business side and also on the system side, and hard work. And I watched the episode that Louis was here a couple of weeks back, right? And he said something that is really to the core of something that I believe, is that your extracurricular activities speak by themselves, right? And I know is not something that a lot of folks like to hear, right? But I'm a strong believer that if you're not, especially early in your career, if you're not working extra hours, it doesn't mean extra hours for the company. If you're not putting a part of your weekend or a part of your nights to read books, to like do some open source, to kind of like do trainings, you're not gonna get to a level of people that are able to get there.
True.
So I look for that. But I think the most important thing is like how quickly are you able to learn? Like all those things are important. But if I had to boil down, is how else someone is able to communicate, to collaborate, and are they putting effort? Are they really? And I know passion about it is not the best way to phrase it, right? But it is something that I all the effort that I put on my career, on weekends, on nights, on like, it was the way that I see people growing kind of like 10x.
Right.
That is actually a quote from a Brazilian writer that is like one of my personal philosophies. He says the following, kind of like, success is built working on nights and weekends. During the day, you do what everybody does. I don't know anyone who has achieved their dreams without sacrificing holidays and Sundays at least 100 times.
True.
As much as I don't want anyone to work extra hours, I don't want them to be doing like projects on their nights and weekends. That should never happen, right?
True. True.
But it's like in order to master the craft of programming,
Yeah.
it's really hard for you to just be doing like 9 to 5 and moving on. But that's not a polite way to ask, right? So you try
True.
to find clues that someone is it has that energy, is like putting that effort. Is
Right.
like and is I have seen I can tell you an example. I had 3 years ago, I had two recent grads that joined around the same time, like beginning of January, right? Out of school, fresh, joined exactly the same cross-functional team and exactly the same salary, everything. One was like treating the job as a kind of, okay, I'm done with college. Now I can kind of like move on with my life and I'm going to do the bare minimum here. And the other one was like, give me more, give me more. Okay, what books do you recommend? Can I talk to these people? Who can mentor me? Who like,
He was hungry.
like he was hungry and
Yes.
he was taking more and more.
Right.
And kind of like first month, you would not see a difference. Second month, third month, you already could see in every single metric that you could look at, right? The and he's like, is it putting? And I don't know how much was because this person was putting a lot of extra hours and was passionate about things, or if it was because he was like doing the most he could, like on 9 to 5, right?
True.
Talking to multiple folks, like, and that is a side of me that believes no, it's because this person was putting some extra time, and that shows a lot. Another part for me, maybe someone that if was using that 8 hours a day really effectively could probably achieve the same results or even achieve more
True.
than this person did.
True.
But it's really rare. It's really rare. Like, and it's like if you really want to grow in your career, I believe two things. One is you have to put extra hours in the first 5 years. And two, you need to change jobs every 2 to 3 years on the first 10 years of your career.
True.
And I can tell why. Because if you get comfortable in one place,
Yeah.
you're not going to learn as much, and you're not going to go to the same cycle of proving yourself, learning a new domain, learning a new language, talking to different kind of people, right? So I strongly recommend if you are kind of like an engineer that's just starting, don't stay in the same company for more than 3 years. I think it's going to slow down your career in so many ways. Unless I would say you're changing enough, you're being challenged, you're moving, the company is on exponential growth, then I would say it is a reason to stay. But if you're kind of like staying flat and comfortable and you see you're doing less and less things, you already build some morale in the company, I would say it's time to change again. Every time you're too comfortable, you have to change, especially early in your career.
True. True. Now, very, very good advice. Specifically, I see, in the start of your career, if you are in software, 9 to 5 is not the thing. It does not mean that you will not have, work-life balance. You can have that. But in this industry, I feel the software, it's moving so fast. Whatever you learned 3 months back is already obsolete. So you have to keep up, keep changing yourself and move fast. So completely agree with your advice here. So Thiago, next question I have, what is the worst management advice you got in your life now when you look back?
Wow. Okay. So I would say probably one of the worst mistakes that I made early in my career. It was not something that anyone said directly, but it was something that I read in a lot of books, and I translated that differently in my mind. It was when I was starting as a people manager, when I had the first group that was reporting to me. I start to read a lot about feedback. It's like, okay, your main job as a manager is to give feedback. It's to feedback every week, every one-on-one, feedback. And I feel that one of the worst mistakes I made was to share raw feedback with someone that was not doing great. So basically, I got someone that was not doing great in a different group move under me. And I started hearing from a lot of people, oh, this person is not doing great. He's getting out of the way. He's wasting me a lot of time. And I decided to do a 3-6 feedback for this person. and I collected maybe 10, 12 pieces of feedback from like 12 people. And what I didn't do was to reflect on everything that was being shared and summarize and see maybe one, two, max of 3 points that I wanted that person to do. What I did was I pretty much like did a dump of every single feedbacks that were highly emotional. I basically read the feedbacks that I got directly to the person, and you can imagine how this person felt.
Right.
And it was today. This person is a great friend, and we talk, but it was really stressful for both of us for maybe 2 years.
Right.
And it's like you have to be careful with feedback. And you have to start with positive feedback,
True.
even if someone is doing badly. I know that's not what managers or people that really advocate for feedback, right? But that's how you build trust, right? And you should almost like, there is this quote from James Clear that I listened to a podcast, and he says, praise the good, ignore the bad. So it's almost like that, right? For a while, you have to praise what's working, even if that's very minimal. And then once you get to the habit, then you start to bring in, oh, maybe you could do this a little different. Unless if it is a super unhealthy behavior and something that offended someone and happening in a meeting was disruptive. But I would be really careful of how you give feedback. You should prepare as a manager.
You're right.
You should almost rewrite and like train that, especially if it is like the first couple of direct reports you have. Right. Talk to your spouse, talk to a friend. Like it's almost, is that coming off? Like you need to be super careful because it's super harmful to a lot of people.
Right.
But it's a different philosophy than you see out there. Right. No, it needs to be straight. It needs to be like, in my experience, it was harmful. So it's one of the most harmful piece of feedback I see. And especially if you don't have enough trust, right?
Right.
If the person is not asking for that, if the person is resistant, right? It's like, it's better to like let the person digest, don't give a feedback, just ask, can you think about this for this week and see if there is anything you would do better, rather than, it's like almost stimulate self-reflection versus then say, this was wrong. Like as a manager, I can tell you that not the behavior I want to see, and kind of like put the person on a position where they feel almost intimidated. They feel that is not my kind of management. But
true.
Is
So I was asking about the worst management advice you got is about giving a raw feedback, and this is kind of becoming a best management advice from you also, that don't take the raw feedback and just dump it on the candidate, but massage it and put it in the right way. So that's very important. So
I would say the other thing is take the feedback. If you do 360, don't take then as everyone. So every person that's giving that feedback has their perspective, their day to day. They're not seeing that person, what that person is doing, what kind of pressure that person is, right? As a manager, you have to almost say, what here, even if there are 10 points of like improvement for that person, what here is the most pressing, and the one that is almost like that idea of like, when you have to pay debt, right? There is that what's called the snowball idea that you pay your smallest piece of debt first, right? And then you get into a snowball, and then you pay the big ones later. It's almost, you start with something that is impactful but is easy. Don't go to something that goes to the heart of the problem. And ask yourself, do I agree? Is that true in my experience as a manager? Is that more than, is it only one person saying that, or is it a pattern? Is your job as a manager to identify the problems that everybody's seeing and that you have seen as well? It doesn't mean that the person that said a particular feedback that was the only person that said is wrong. It just means that you cannot take one perspective and pass it through to the person. Is more harmful than helpful.
Perfect. Yeah, true. So I know I'm taking a lot of your time, but I have just last two questions. And then I have a lot of other questions. I'll do a part 2 with you. So my last two questions are, what is the best management advice you got in your life, which you think helped you a lot?
The first one that came to mind, there are probably others, but is when I start to be a manager, the one thing that my director at the time said to me is managers here are servant leaders. They are here to serve the team. They're not here to kind of like, it's not the other way around. It's not that team members are serving you, you are serving the team. And this person was a strong believer of servant leadership. So that really, I already had that belief, right? And the fact that I was hearing that from that person, I was seeing that person doing that, it kind of made me be that kind of leader that I'm really proud, and is the kind of leader that I try to find whenever I'm moving to a different company, right?
True.
But let me think about, there may be more.
Sure.
There may be more. Another one, and I think that is a more recent one, that it was like a great leadership advice. And that came from the CTO from one of the companies that I worked for. Like, we're struggling a lot with decision making. And he said this quote that I don't think he had idea how powerful that was. He said, for 99% of things in life, a bad decision is better than no decision. As far as you're willing to revisit that in the future,
True.
make a decision today. Start to time box how long it's taking to make decisions. Don't over kind of engineer, right? It is like, it is better to make a bad decision today.
Very good
and
advice.
fail and revisit later
Yes.
and iterate, right? Then no decision today and tomorrow with the illusion that you're going to get to the perfect decision or solution tomorrow.
Yes.
That is such a powerful thing. It's
Very,
like,
yeah.
and it's like, you start to think about agile, right? What is agile? Is making decisions even if you're not 100% sure, because you know the moment you make it is the moment that you're actually going to find the problem.
Yeah.
If you keep like delaying it, oh, we're not sure, we still don't agree, it's such a waste of time, and it's such a big problem for the morale of the team when things are not moving as quickly as they can,
Right.
because the decisions are not being taken.
Right.
Like, we are afraid. It's like almost, you need to be fearless in so many ways. You need,
Right.
like, a great manager is someone that's fearless, that is kind of like, is not afraid to challenge up in the organization.
Yes.
Not someone that is pushing all the work down. Someone that is kind of like, is almost like not afraid to lose the job. It's like, it's someone that's like, he wants to fight so hard,
Right.
that kind of like, if you lose the job, he's like, he's going to tell more to this person than to kind of like just push down work on people that this person doesn't believe in.
Yes, true. Being fearless, I think, is one of the key thing to be successful in life, actually. Forget being a good manager or not. Being fearless is very, very important, because otherwise you will not remain truthful to yourself. So very, very good advice. So Thiago, last question. I want to know about your failures. You know, everybody see you as a successful person. I want to know, when you failed, how you came through it, what did you learn, and how you improved it.
Wow. Yeah, there are many failures. I mean, so there is that example that I share about the feedback and how that was harmful and how it took me years to rebuild trust with that person. There are other two stories that I think are really powerful, and they shape me. And that is about how random things are sometimes. I remember 2011. So I was talking at the beginning of this interview, right, about the day that I went to this conference, and then 2012 I was able to get into ThoughtWorks. But in between, there was an opportunity in another company that I was really excited about. I gave my nights and weekends preparing. I drove like 4 hours to interview. I was like, that's the company I want to work. And I got rejected. That was the first rejection, right? Got rejected, got devastated, drove back home crying, and asked for feedback, and I never received any feedback from the company, but it didn't work out. And then a year later, I was able to get into ThoughtWorks, right? And that kind of like completely changed my trajectory. And then a second failure was when I interviewed with Google for the first time in 2015. So I was software engineer at the time, and imagine, right? Like Google, I was really excited about it. The same way. I remember on that day, I had maybe 7 interviews in a row, whiteboard coding, like And I remember on my way back home on the subway in New York, I was almost kind of like throwing up. I was like, and I got home, I went straight to bed. I was
Exhausted.
so exhausted.
Yes.
I was so, and of course I didn't get in, even though it was close. I mean, but then looking back at those two failures, right, is amazing what came next. It's like the first one, it didn't work out, but then I was able to get an opportunity that was 10 times bigger. And I was able to learn English, be in an environment that the culture was really close to my heart, right? And the second one, if I had left the startup that I was at the time to join Google, I would never had the experience on leadership, and like I would have never managed like AWS account, and like have like such a powerful experience on system design, and like doing so many things. And this experience that allowed me to then later get into Amex, be promoted to engineering manager in 2 months after joining the company, and kind of succeed there because I was already doing the job in this startup. So, but a lot of times you like in the moment, you don't see those experiences, those failures as having any meaning, right?
True.
And a lot of times that life has other plans for you, right?
True.
Life is so random.
Yes.
And I actually wrote in Twitter like the other day about how how I got my first job in New York, and how I got lucky to have a visa due to a mistake the recruiter made on the email that I sent. Basically, the recruiter had assumed that I had a visa already. I just needed a renewal. And it was because I wrote, I need a brand new visa. The understanding was, oh, you just need a renewal. You don't need a new visa. You don't need to go through the process, just a renewal. And then I went to the interview process, did all. But I think those are two examples of failures. And that goes back to kind of like the idea of interviewing every 2-3 years is really powerful, but also really painful. Because every time you put yourself there to interview, you kind of, your ego, you're kind of like, you are being, it's harsh feedback, right? It's not easy to be rejected. Like no one likes to be rejected, especially when you put hours, weekends, nights preparing for that.
True. Now, very, very good tip here, because the failure is just a detour, right?
Yes.
We should always take this failures are detour. It's not the end of the road. And always go with this mindset. So every time you get failure, you never know. You may end up in better place. My personal...
You should treat interviews as small bets, right? This guy on Twitter, Daniel Vassallo, is like, every interview should not spend more than a week or two preparing for it. And if it works, is amazing upside. You're going to double your salary sometimes, right? But if it doesn't, it's like, you move on. Let's try again. And yeah, of course, you should have small wins if you can, and kind of like, but you should treat that as a bet, right?
Exactly.
But keep interviewing. Don't wait too long, because the market's harsh. It's hard to if you stay 10 years in the same company, you're going to struggle to interview and get in other companies.
Exactly. And I think in my career, I interviewed maybe more than 100 people. And so many times it happened that we rejected some candidate, and knowing that he's a good fit, but he got rejected because, as you know, in Google and Microsoft, 7 or 8 people interview you, and 2 of them just don't like something, so you just get rejected. So never take any rejection personal, because I feel it's so much subjective and so much luck plays in the game. Sometimes somebody is not in a good mood. I remember one of my rejection in early my career when I was starting as a software engineer, and I was in C++ dev, and I went to some place and he said, explain me how the OLE object linking works in Windows. I never heard about that term that time, and he was asking me internal detail of it. And obviously every failure is a learning too. So you fail, you come back and learn about OLE. So that's the learning. So Thiago, thank you very much. I think I took a lot of your time, but I am really appreciative of you taking some time to speak with us. I have at least 10 to 15 more questions, which I will do hopefully part 2 later on, but thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you, Rafa. Thank you for doing this project. It's amazing.